Welcome, Alafia. I've invited my dear friend and brother since I was about 19 or 20 years old, since I was a teenager, for this week's episode. Baba Omigbade Escayg, who I affectionately call that, but the world really knows him as Baba Onífádé Olówu, a long-standing Babalawo who has been, my gosh, around the world sharing his art and his music and his teachings and his scholarship for many years. Scientific researcher, musician, and former educator. Welcome, Omigbade Escayg.
Thank you very much. Omotinue.
Okay, so.
Am I going there?
You can go there. Yes, Omotinue is one of my many names that means initiated before birth.
Correct.
Yes, a very old name. And thank you for remembering that, Omi. Very few people know that.
Thank you for having me here.
Oh,
it's great to be here.
I couldn't think of anyone better to launch our podcast in the time that we are existing right now, other than you, particularly now also because of the series you have going on, addressing the sickness and the imbalance and injustice and how our tradition can really be a pathway for us to overcome, transform, and heal.
Yeah,
so.
It's very important.
Mm-hmm.
We've and this is not to say that what people believe and what people follow is not right for them or not good for them, but when we take a step back to think about what is truly ours, to reflect on where we come from
Mm-hmm.
and what our traditions really are and what they were, and begin our own spiritual search for a sense of self that is about discovery rather than a dogma that somebody has placed on us to say, we're supposed to wear a tie, or we supposed to wear these kinds of shoes, or we're supposed to kneel at this particular point in time, or we're supposed to say, yes, thank you, sir, because of, we start to realize that we're honoring someone else's intention other than ours. We're honoring someone else's desire to have us behave in a specific way relative to a command, right? And we can call that colonialism. We can call that oppression under religious systems. We can call it whatever we want to. When we break free of that by finding our own spirituality, we uncover a vastness of our history. We uncover the vastness of our being. We uncover the depth of our being because we connect to something that allows us to see even much more than we are told that we should see or we can see.
That's interesting, right? Because you're talking about seeing and having what I said earlier, the awakening, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when one comes into that place, it's going to tie into the first question I'd really like to ask you. And I want to do it around a bit of in front of a backdrop, right? Which is, you're an artist, right? You're an educator. You're an amazing storyteller, right? Which is very much connected to African tradition. With all of that, right? For me, and I'm going to align it with myself, right? I have done the arts, I have done education, community economic development, all of that. And it gets to a point where you want to do that for your own healing, for your family, and for your community. But it gets to a point where with the economic development, with the cultural, with the educational, you reach a point where there's something missing, right? And although many of us have spirituality, there's this liberation in connecting to your African and indigenous spirituality that really cracks it all open. And once you get it, the awakening, my question for you is, so once you get there, you see it. But how do you cultivate that? Like, what are you cultivating in your life right now? You're a Baba, you're an achieved musician, you've run a public school, a charter school for umpteen years as a principal. You travel the world. You just came back from Trinidad playing, in all the juve. I mean, you've done it all, right? What do you still have to cultivate? What are you cultivating today?
I am cultivating in every second that I breathe gratitude for the breath and the life that I have, and the ability to express my divinity in every moment of now.
Your divinity. What does that mean?
So if we step back a bit and you say, we get to this point where, we're doing all of this stuff, and then what's the next step? Mm-hmm. And for African people, I think we have to know, we have to be so sure that the next step that we are going to take is going to be the biggest step of our life, that we have to be able to jump off the cliff and know that we're going to fly. We have to know that we have wings. We have to know that there is a force within us that is going to carry us to this place. All we have to do is take the step.
And what place is that? Carry us to?
So I can only speak from my own personal journey.
Please.
So I was perhaps 16. I was always a very spiritual, religious child, right? And when I say religious, I was brought up in a Christian family.
Okay.
And my intention, from as far as I can recall, was to be a priest. I wanted to be a priest.
Even a Christian priest?
Even a Christian
Didn't
priest.
matter.
I would get up in the middle of a service if I saw a light out, a candle out on the altar when I was about 5 or 6 years old. And I would be like the most pious, I was like a little pope.
Oh my God.
Going up to the altar to tell the priest
Very sacred.
in the middle of Mass that the candle was out. And genuflect, never turn my back on the altar, come back to where my mother and father and my family was sitting, and everybody in the church looking at me like this. And of course, when Mass was over, I'm getting all these pats on my shoulder. I mean, that's how I came up. Huh. But I always stayed very, very close to the belief in God. When I was 16, I had a horrible accident. I broke my neck.
Yeah.
I was at the top of my game as a dancer, at that time I wasn't even really involved in music the way I was involved in music. But I was a dancer. I was an athlete. I went back to school because I was considered island scholarship potential. I was in love. It was my first time being well, that started at 5 years old, but this was the next stage. And my world came crashing down.
At 16?
At 16. I broke my neck. I didn't know what happened. I didn't know. One moment I was conscious, on a mission for love and everything else. And the next thing I know, I was being wheeled into a hospital with doctors sewing up my head, and the pain that ensued after was just unimaginable. I broke my neck. There was nothing they could do. They had to pull my head out of the steering wheel, and somebody threw me on their back and ran to the nursing home, which was a block away. Interestingly, they said that by the time he had gotten to the site, there was a woman there, all dressed in white. They did not know where she came from, and they never knew where she went to. And nobody knows who this woman was. Nobody knows what she did, but this woman, all dressed in white, was right there at the accident site.
Huh.
I had no idea what had happened.
Of course.
Right? I remember specifically coming out of that, realizing that my life was wrecked, pretty much gone. Everything that I had believed in, everything that I had worked for, everything that I had loved had disappeared in that accident and during that time. And I cursed God. I turned away from that sense of religion because I felt that it disappointed me, that he turned his back on me. Why your son, who's been so faithful to you, why would this happen? Why would you take everything from me?
Right.
And for years, I just was in this place all through university, through my early 20s, and I was just in this horrible place, feeling that that life had done me something wrong, and that life had taken something from me, and I could not reconcile. My behavior was erratic. I was a good student, so it didn't affect my brain, but my interactions with people and in life had just become this really horrible thing, toxic in a lot of ways, until I found the drum.
A drum? How'd you find the drum?
Well, I couldn't, for as long as I could recall, I couldn't dance again.
Wow.
And when I went to university, there was a small Caribbean performing group on the campus, and I felt that nobody there would know that I was a dancer, and I could go in from scratch and try my hand and my legs to dance.
Okay.
To dance.
Oh, again.
And so I went, but the guy who was in charge of the group knew of me from Trinidad. He didn't say anything until much later on. And so I started dancing again. And it was through dance that I started to gravitate more and more to the drum. Now, as a little boy, where we lived in Faizabad in South Trinidad, I could hear in the night, one of the things that I think really stuck in my consciousness was there was a spiritual yard.
Okay.
Not too far from where we were, and the sound of this drum would come over the hill, and I was consciously aware that that drum was alive and present in my life from this high. And
talking to you.
And
probably.
Talking to me. And it was only upon, so I started playing. I started, playing in Canada, where I was at university and stuff, and I was playing pan, I was playing my drums, I was really getting back to my roots. This was the thing that saved me and took me through school, and some of the jazz that I discovered, people like John Lucien, I mean,
dear friend of yours,
Lonnie Liston Smith, and music that really spoke to a sense of consciousness, a sense of that love of nature, that island, that sensitivity of life, altogether.
Right.
And I got back to Trinidad, exploring as a percussionist and so on, and I started seeing things moving in front of me.
Just walking down the street, not in a spirit yard, not in a
spirit,
drumming,
not in a drumming
thing,
not
or nothing.
not in anything like that.
Just walking down the road, and then
Just
you
walking
see
down
things
the road,
moving.
I'm sitting down at home and I'm seeing an energy moving, or I am hearing a voice talking to me, or I am doing something and I am being told, don't do that.
Huh.
And I remember, you know, there was something that I was told not to do, and I decided I was going to do it anyhow. And the following day I got up and I had a big black eye. I kid you not, this is my ancestors were they had a handle on me that was just unbelievable as I started that path altogether. And
wow.
One thing led to the next. I started to seek them out. I started to feel this warmth. I started to feel this thing stirring in my soul. You know, that there was something else that was going on. And the music that I was involved in was very traditional. I was getting back to drumming, like the Trinidad rhythms, and remembering my early experiences as a dancer with the Shango cult in Trinidad, and you know, and so things just started to, like, the pieces of the puzzle just started to come together. And I remember I had to go and find my ancestors. Who were they? You know, I knew of my family. I knew of my great grandmother, who I met when she was she must have been about 103 by the time I first met her. I must have been about 4 or 5 years old or something like that. She had already returned to her second childhood. She was bedridden. I remember her face. She had the most unbelievable eyes.
Oh.
And she had 2 long braids all around her bed. There were candles and stuff.
What?
She was black like the night.
Okay.
And I remember specifically that day, that first time that I saw, I could never forget. And I want to say, just out of curiosity, I might have reached out and touched her hand.
Oh my gosh.
And she never let me go.
Since that touch. Omi, you said something that you had to find your ancestors. How'd you know that? Like, what happened? You just woke up one day and I have to find them, and then was she the catalyst?
I was hearing stuff. I was being moved in a different way, you know. And if I had told the story, I would have been probably put in the asylum.
You know, Omi, in this series that we're doing, spiritually awakened people, that is not a unique story that have tried to tell people that these things they're hearing, and oftentimes from working with children in the African tradition with the drum, and what happens, these beings we see are awakening, right? That thing that's stirring inside of them, and they begin to express it, but there's no context. There's no elders to guide them. There's nobody to align them. And so you were one that was able to pull it together and still operate in society and gradually take yourself down that road.
I was very fortunate.
Wow.
I was very, very fortunate. I think perhaps the most pivotal recollection for me was I was working with one of Trinidad's huge bands called Fireflight. And it was, you know, around carnival time and everything else. And we had finished a gig, and I knew that I had to go find my ancestors that night. I knew where they were. I knew that they were all buried. At least that mother my great-grandmother, Mamimi, who I told
With
you
the
about,
two long
with the
braids.
two long braids, Josephine Neptune,
Uh-huh.
she was in the ground up there on top that hill in Pointe-à-Pierre in San Fernando. And I remember I had to find certain things with which to do a libation to go into the space.
Were you told that?
I was told that.
Okay. By whom?
I had to find, the message came.
Oh, it was.
The message came. I had to find goat milk. I had to find gin. I had to
Okay.
find water. And I had to libate at the entrance of the cemetery to go in to my grandmother's
This was an
great-grandmother.
intuitive message.
This was an intuitive message.
Okay. Transmitted.
And I had
you.
to carry my drum.
Okay, you were.
And I had to go in the middle of the night.
Okay.
And so I was finished with the gig and with all of my stuff. A day before, I came down to the area to see if I could find goat milk. So I found somebody who had goats because I saw them walking the goats out on the street. And I followed the person and I asked them for goat milk. And I went to their home and they gave me goat milk. And and that's a whole other story because then they wanted me to marry their daughter and all kinds of stuff. Right? And they wanted me to take their son back to Port of Spain and help him to develop because that's what it was like in the country at that time. And so I got everything that was necessary.
Right.
And when I was finished with the gig, I drove from Sangre Grande, which is where the gig was, to Pointe-à-Pierre. Mm-hmm. And I went up on Pointe-à-Pierre Hills into that cemetery to find my great-grandmother. I found the site. I had brought all of these offerings and I stood there in the middle of the night.
Alone?
Alone with my drum. And I had to play. I had to play my drum in the middle of the cemetery in the middle of the night. And I just, no fear. No fear. This is what I mean, jumping off the cliff and knowing that you have the wings. No fear. Mm-hmm. I stood there and I played my drum and I played and I played and I must have played for so long I don't even know. But what brought me out of wherever I was is that I was motioned to look up, and in my consciousness as I looked up, there were 9 huge birds, 9 huge birds in a circle over me. In the middle of the cemetery, in the middle of the night.
So, with that, 9 being in a graveyard in the nighttime, playing a drum, birds in the sky, being an IFA priest today, what do you know now what that meant then?
That's a serious question.
That the part you're willing to share with us.
That it is, my life is full circle, Omotinue. My cup runs over, having had the opportunity to experience that at a tender age. I was maybe just about 25, 26. And now that I am 63, having had the opportunity to again listen to Mami Me, because she told me that I had to leave Trinidad in order to be able to do what I had to do, and that I had to follow the sound of a particular drum.
Wow.
Now, before that happened, I was also sent to the water to meditate in the middle of the night.
Another message.
Another message.
Okay.
So I went down to Macareep. And in the middle of the night, I sat there. I must have got there about 9 o'clock. I went to the water, and I don't know if you're familiar with Macareep, but at night when the moon dances on the water, that iridescence comes in off the shore in Macareep, and it's just a majestic place to be. And so and during that time, you know, things are different in Trinidad now, you know, but I sat there and I went into meditation. And I was very comfortable, no fear. And I mean, I'm not even aware of anything that is a danger or a threat,
go wrong,
because or something that could go wrong, because I'm not in that space at all.
No fear.
No fear.
Huh.
And I sat there and I became a seed, and the wind took me over the water, and I went right back to African shore.
So there's a couple of things happening in there. There's a lot of things happening in there. So first is, this is before you were initiated into Yemoja.
Correct.
Thus the name Omi,
Correct.
which means water.
Correct.
But you had a message, you had to go to water. You sat there alone, you followed that message, you were obedient, right? You didn't think you were going crazy.
No.
And that's the part that before we end today, I need to know what you did. What helped you to follow that message that took you to the edge of a beach, to sit and meditate, to fly over as a seed to Africa, probably get fed, nurtured, come back, and then begin your transformation on another level? What made you not think you were crazy? What helped you to follow that path and not be crazy? Because, you know, you hear sometimes if spirits start speaking to people, we see them all the time in the street, right? There's that line between that dimension and this that has completely been erased. What kept you grounded and still not only seeking, but communicating with another dimension? That line was still there, but you were able to, without fear, step in and still come back. You always had one foot here. I think when we see people going crazy, people walking down the street, sometimes they're not really great. The line is gone. What kept you here?
I think it was really the drum, because everything that started to happen was unleashed because of the vibration of that membrane. I was very close also to my grandmother, and my grandmother, who pretty much was one of the loves of my life, and it was her mother that was Mamimi.
Mamimi.
Yeah, Mamimi.
Mamimi.
And my family line, which is that African family line, is a matriarchal line. The mother of Mamimi is Julia Daniel, and she is the one who birthed, from what we know so far, is the one who birthed the entire family line.
And that's your
that's my great grandmother. So let me tie a couple of pieces together. The meditation at the water took me to Africa. And it was there that I experienced the village. And it was from there that I experienced the journey across the Atlantic. In that meditation, I felt the whip. I felt the tear of my skin. I smelled the stank of being in the holds of the ship. I experienced everything in the Middle Passage. When I remember getting there around 9 o'clock at night, and I got home. The entire house was closed up. I had no idea what time it was. I had to knock on the window to wake up my baby brother, who opened the door for me to come into the house. And when I looked, it was about 3:30 in the morning. So I have no idea how many hours in this other space and in this other time, in this other journey, reconnecting with the soul of that experience that would drive me for the rest of my life.
And that's the positive part of it. I think, Omi, you say something so powerful about how you experienced everything in the Middle Passage, right? And I really believe people who are awakening, African people, they are experiencing those traumas on a cellular, spiritual, soul, emotional level, and it's driving them crazy. And they don't know what they're experiencing a lot. And that is the fact that, and we act out in so many different ways, and not just to the real visceral physical oppression that we're dealing with in abuse every day, but there's another cellular level of trauma that's happening. And when we ask for more, we actually get it, and we start that membrane that you talk about on the drum. It's that membrane between the past and the present that starts to become thin, and we begin to experience it, and we can't figure it out. You are such an example. I mean, I'm not going to go into a love fest with my brother, but I think you are such an example and a model for so many, because I know so many people that start to experience that and feel they're going crazy, or they just become just damn angry, and they may operate every day, but they're pissed as hell, and they just don't know why. So you're talking about Egun's ancestors, you're talking about a membrane thinning, experiencing things, and then the reality of what we're dealing with every day. Damn, I mean, people must be exhausted. However, but you found your way to Ifa, as and now a Babalawo. What is that? I know what it is, but it seems like that, I've heard you, let me just preface a little more and say, I've heard you tell your wife, okay, this outfit, this is my burial outfit, this is my Ifa outfit, this is the most sacred outfit. And that was before I was even initiated into Ifa. And you had such, you had reached the top of that religious, spiritual place. Not that you had learned everything, you would be a lifelong student, I've also heard you say, but it was like you had arrived at that place where you will be fed now with everything you needed, it seemed like. What is Ifa? And what is a Babalao in that? Because it seems like you've been initiated in, I'm not even going to name them, a lot of traditions around the world, Native American, Eastern, many, Palo. It's like, what is this African tradition about?
It's about your soul. It's about your purpose in life. It is, if you give credence to your ancestral line, you'll realize that there is something that is truly magnificent. There is a destination. There is a diving board from which you can take that dive. And for me, that dive was Ifa. That dive was to become a Babalao. I just felt that there was a need for me to evolve spiritually based on the gifts that I was blessed with by my ancestors. And I felt that it was necessary for me as a son to whom they came to carry this to the highest level that I could possibly carry it until it is time for me to join them. And so when I, it's a funny story. I was playing music. I was playing music, and I was supposed to go and, I was helping to move a piano, and the guys pushed the piano, and my thumb got caught between the piano and the door, and my thumb popped like a tomato. Right, they had to take me to the hospital. There's blood all over the place.
Oh my God!
And I watched the doctor sewing up my finger and all kinds of stuff. Right, but I went to a lawyer. I was working on something else. I went to a lawyer, and the lawyer saw my hand, and the lawyer said, "How did this happen?" I told him. He said, "Did it happen in a workplace? Did it happen somewhere?" I said, "Well, why?" He says, "Because if it is something, I could get you some money for it." Right? I mean, I must have been really in bad shape. So I told him what had happened, and he said, "Well, look, we can file a claim for this."
Right.
And I thought, amazing. I could get some money. And he filed a claim, and I got some money. And I did two things with the money. I went and I took the money and I went to Nigeria.
Okay.
And the other thing that I did with the rest of the money is I finished my CD, my first CD.
Okay.
So it just happened that this was an opportunity for me at this point in time to do something that I wanted to do spiritually, to take my spirituality to another level altogether. And I always tell people, that when I went to IFA, when I went to get initiated as an IFA priest, I came back thinking that it would take my Ori, my head,
yes,
500 years to catch up to what it is I had just done.
Right. Oh my gosh, that's a couple of lifetimes.
Yes,
at least.
It will take a couple of lifetimes, because I felt that this was so ethereal. This was like me going back to the point of my beginning. They had to quiet me down in Igbodu, because I was so happy. I was dancing in Igbodu. My spirit was alive.
And Igbodu is the place you get initiated.
It's the place where it is the sacred grove of Ifa, where your initiation happens, where you on earth reconnect with that moment in time when your Ori, your head receives its destiny in heaven to come to earth.
Okay, let's say that one more time. So, Ifa initiation is, and the Igbodu is the place where you connect to your self in heaven.
Yes.
Which has other days, right? You connect back there to reconnect with the destiny that you had affirmed for the walk you're going to do on planet Earth.
Absolutely.
Okay, and that's IFA.
And that's IFA.
IFA.
That's what my Baba IFA told me.
Okay.
Baba Sunde Oduwole.
Okay.
Now my Olúwo is Baba Desanya Aoyade.
Okay.
Right? But my Baba who taught me,
right,
he was the one who said, Omi, you know what you did when you go to Igbodu? And I said, well, I got initiated to Ifa. He said, Omi, you went back to your origins.
Right.
In heaven.
Right.
Here in Igbodu, heaven and earth meet.
It's like an awakening. You wake up. Okay, so what's Ifa like? If you could give me the abridged 2-sentence version because Ifa is so vast. And a version, a definition that, like, your students would understand.
Well, let's first identify what Ifa is, right? Ifa is considered the body of work and the experiences and the insights of the divinity Orunmila.
Right.
And that body of work is translated into the many verses of the sacred Odus, which are considered the word of God and the wisdom of the heavens, of creation, for not just the Yoruba people, but for mankind.
Right.
So when we say we get initiated to Ifa, for me, it means that I become a disciple of Orunmila. I become one of Orunmila's sons. And I make a covenant at that point in Igbodu to live out my life according to the sacred principles of Ifa.
Right.
To have and live with good character.
Iwapele.
Iwapele.
Right.
To be honest in my dealings, to touch people's lives in a way that helps them to become more spiritual, to be more elevated in their own journey, and to help them arrive at their destiny.
Now I know how you didn't lose your mind. It's very clear.
There was a purpose.
It's very clear.
It's a purpose.
So,
but it was I mean, if I had to say this clearly, it was my association with the drum that brought me to all of this, because I was told by my ancestor that you had to follow the sound of a particular drum. And so I came, Omotinue, in Trinidad at that time, I was a well-known musician. I was getting gigs left, right, and center. I was a young marine research biologist whose work was being sought after by the Australian Museum of Natural History.
Right.
We were doing cutting-edge work in terms of seafloor ecology.
Right.
I was awarded a fellowship by the United Nations and to go and study seafloor ecology. Right. I was at the top of my game, and in this awakening, and I was making lots of money. I was flying up the islands. I was having a great old time.
Fun, right?
I turned my back on all of it. I walked away. I quit the job as a young marine research biologist, making serious money. I walked away. I got fed up with Trinidad and Tobago. I no longer wanted to work for an uncaring nation at that point in time. I was being moved by something else. And I figured that if I'm being told to go and follow the drum, then there's something else.
Right.
And so my parents, my family thought I was
cuckoo.
Yeah, left of center. I had everything. Why would I
do that?
Son, where are you going? I don't know.
I'm going to take
What are you going to do? I'm going to go and play music. Where are you going to stay? I don't know. I'll figure it out. And on May 15, 1984, with one suitcase, a little bit of money in my pocket that, the Trinidad and Tobago government only allowed you to take a certain amount of money. And a full moon, I left to start a new life on my birthday, May 16, in 1984, in this part of the world.
Okay.
And then, like they say, the rest is history. I started seeking out drummers. I went to my first teacher in Buffalo, Emil Latimer. He taught with Nina Simone, and that's a whole other
and that
story,
was
right?
music.
This
though.
was all music, but this was the drum.
So
And finding him and connecting with his spirituality enhanced my return.
Right.
So when I came back, I sought him out. I went to Buffalo.
Right.
And I told him, I'm just coming. What you gonna do? I'm just coming. Bo, I'm just coming. Okay. And he prepared a room for me. He prepared a room. He told his wife, this is a spiritual son coming home. He prepared a room for me, set up this room like a beautiful little African village for me. And every day, every single day, it was about the drum. I had dreams. I must have spent about a month with him.
Wow.
Every day, the drum. Everything we did was the drum. If it was jazz, if it was classes we were doing, I was teaching dance. I was doing all kinds of things related to the tradition, because that's how he lived and that's how he embraced me. And together, he was May 15 is his birthday, and my birthday is May 16.
So
we're Taurians.
We talked about that already, right? Taurians in the house.
Taurians in the house.
So, Omi, you're talking about music, you're talking about ancestors, you're talking about mothers, right? With all that's going on in our world today, right? Because since we've been talking, those themes keep coming up, and not just to mention the drum, which is that thing, which we're not going to go into because I know that's another session with you, because that's a world of, I think, realization on another frequency, yeah? So that feeds this frequency. With all that's happening, and the other day just having, one of the most recent, George Floyd, being brutally killed in front of our eyes, and his face being on the floor, and some of the last sounds and words he used was "mama, mama," before he exhausted. Many people feel there's the connection to him speaking to the earth, Mother Earth in Yoruba tradition, the earth deity, which you could, or calling his mother, who's deceased in the ancestral realm, and her coming. Some people really feel that was a major part of turning everything on its head in this country and starting a movement that people can't understand. Like, why? Do you agree with that? Or do you think there's something else that was in motion, or that activated, or the key that turned that lock to make companies start changing their image, their brand, their name, their associations alignment, for people to start looking at their policies? Not everybody, but somewhat, for people to be in the streets marching, and for people to now even have white allies, or what's happening? Or Black people to start walking down the street carrying open, running after people who are threatening Black women and saying, you threaten them, we're going to protect them. What's going on? And how does Mama and that earth and Egun, the ancestors, and woman connect to all of that?
Omotinue, this is a pivotal moment in our history. And it is all connected. It is such a powerful realization. It was such a powerful image that those of us who experience it and will never forget it. So here are some things that I would like to offer. When we talk about our ancestors, right? We talk about it is not just about the people who passed on in our lives. It is the fact that they continue their life through us.
Ashe.
As we are the sum total of our ancestral experience.
Mm-hmm.
And we pass that on to our children.
Mm-hmm.
And so the ancestral line, the spiritual DNA, the blood continues to flow that way. Which is why we all have a responsibility to where we came from and to honor the sacrifice that they made so that we could take a breath today.
Mm-hmm.
So, Ifa tells us, Ogbo logbo, babalawo, ni fowo, ti oju opon Ifa.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a story from Ogbe Alara, which is actually the Odu that fell for the year, this year, 2020-2021 in Nigeria, read by the Council of Ifa priests throughout the world. Right? This Odu tells us that Orunmila had seen disparities in the world. He saw that people were sad and people were happy. People had and people didn't. People felt they were free and people were oppressed.
Right.
And he wanted to know what brings about this disparity. And if he could find the answer, could he use that to enhance his life and to raise up the life of his followers?
Mm-hmm.
And he went for divination. And in divination, he was told to make a particular sacrifice. And he should take the entrails of that sacrifice to a particular place. And he should remain there, not too far away. The Babalao told him that he is about to find out one of the greatest secrets of the world that nobody knew or that people were not conscious of, and that it would change his life. And so Ifa went, he did what he was supposed to do, and he waited there. About 2-3 o'clock in the morning, Orunmila noticed a very imposing figure coming to where he had left the sacrifice. He recognized that it was a woman, and he recognized that she was naked. He also recognized that she was feeding on what he had left there as the offering. And when she was finished feeding, she said, "You can come out now." Of course, Orunmila was completely surprised that the woman had already known that he was there.
Mm-hmm.
And when she approached Orunmila, she told Orunmila, she said, "The greatest secret of the world as to why there is sadness and there is happiness is because of woman. As to why there is wealth and there is poverty, it is woman. It is because of woman. Woman is the secret of the world."
Mm.
He was told, Orunmila, that everything in life, if you want to experience joy, if you want to experience growth, if you want to experience well-being, that the secret to all of that lies within woman.
Why don't we hear that? I'm not going to ask you, do we? I'm going to say, why don't we hear that? Because I don't hear that story. I mean, I hear it and I know the Odu, but it is not something that someone getting into West African Yoruba tradition readily hears up front, especially with, just Babas and that being at the forefront and all of that. My question is, why is that not typically shared as much as the other?
I don't know, but IFA wants me to
share
this, because it is IFA who is speaking.
Yeah. Because that's the Odu.
This is the Odu, and Ifa tells us that you should not cast aspersions or subdue or think any different about or have any negative thought about any woman, regardless of their stature or their size. It's clear. It's very clear.
Specific in the Odu.
Very specific. If I wanted to find out about the secret of the world, what is the secret of the world? The secret of the world is the feminine. And this is not just for the physical woman. This is for the earth as we know her.
Break that down for me. The earth, right? Because you did earlier, but I don't know if.
Well, I'm coming to George Floyd and his call on the earth and to the mother, right? The call to the mother.
Mm-hmm.
So in his last breath, he is calling out to his mother. His face is on the ground. And people are seeing that he's talking into the earth, but he's really calling for his mother, who is in the ancestral realm.
Right.
Ifa tells us that there is Orun above. There are two heavens, Orun above and Orun below. And that when we journey to Orun above, we journey through Orun below. The ancestors and the Orishas are in Orun below. So him with his face on the earth, calling to his mother, that went right into that realm. Absolutely into that realm. And his mother heard him, and she ran through the ancestral village and awakened every ancestor of our people. That, I remember seeing during all that was going on in the street, there was a young lady with her fist up like this, and she had a placard that said, "We are not like our ancestors. We will F you up." And I said, I see the stance of our young people, but what she does not know is that she is
the ancestor.
The ancestor. She
right.
is expressing that ancestor. Mm-hmm. And all of us who were in that situation was expressing exactly that. Mm-hmm. That rage of no more, not enough, you have done it for so long.
So not only are we our ancestors returned and we're their wildest dreams, we are our ancestors returned.
We are. In the immediacy of being in this present.
Right.
Which is why, I continue to say, my intention for me to cultivate now is to express that divinity in this moment, every single moment, every breath that I have. Truth.
Well, we're definitely going to have you back because we just did part 1. So the part 2 about woman and this, it's a whole year long manifestation, realization of the Odu, the reading coming out of Ile Ife, Ogbe Alara for the world. And it's very clear in there, Omi, as you shared, it's not just for followers of Ifa. It's not just for Orisha people. It's not just for folks in Africa. It is for the world. And we're seeing even a lot of women stepping up. And I'd love to have you back to talk again more about that.
I would love to come back. But before we break, can I just add one more thing?
Please do.
So in relation to the ancestral piece, right? And for so many people out there who are like this at this point in time, a simple dedication of a space to your ancestors can bring so much healing, so much insight, so much power, so much stability during this time when you need that anchor. And Ogbe Alara tells us about it as well too.
Anchor, please. We talked earlier about how not to go crazy when you start calling on them and all those things we're dealing with. And we need the anchor. The drum anchored you in one way to connect to your eguns, but you're now giving a prescription.
Absolutely.
To anchor us.
Yes.
And that is creating a sacred space for our ancestors.
Correct.
How do we do that?
Well, here's the Odu. Ogbe Alara again on this. Baba Roloro Eni Soro Lauda Adifa Fun Orumila Ifa lo begumule lagbala Mobegumule modiwi Orumila elasoji Ifa lo begumule lagbala Mobegumule modiwi. And this says to us that when we meet a confidant, we sometimes become talkative. I read all kinds of things into that. You know, like the people who are losing their and they're talking, you know, because they meet a confidant. Who is the confidant? The confidant is that ancestral spirit that you can talk to, that we don't know what's going on, right? And Ifa, it says that it was divine for Orumila when he was going to make a covenant with his ancestors in the sacred grove. I too made a covenant with my ancestors. Orumila Elasoji, Orumila's, whose one of his praise names is Elasoji, Ifa made a covenant with his ancestors and became immortal. I too made a covenant with my ancestors and I became immortal. So this Odu is telling us that those who get lost, those who fall by the wayside, those who get mixed up in all the craziness and lose their focus, lose their sense of being, that could be averted if we pay attention to our ancestors. If we give reverence to our ancestors, in particular for our people.
And everybody has an ancestor.
And everybody has
access. You don't have to be initiated. It's there for you, and you know the language of your people.
Correct.
Just don't forget them.
Don't forget them.
I'm so full. There's so much to learn, and it was so important for me to have a brother, not just my brother, but a Babalawo that is so strong, yet so courageous to share this, which takes a level of humility as well. I can't thank you enough. I have so many questions popping off in my head, which I will pause and have control and wait for next time. Omi, I'd like to ask you one question. I want you to finish this statement. I am the spirit of
the divine essence.
Ashe. Thank you.
Let Orumila be praised.